Hey nerds, Farmer Jesse here. Welcome to Growers Daily, your daily dose of ecological farming insight. It is Monday, December 29th, 2025, and today we are talking about making mulching work for you. If collaborative farms are the answer, why aren't we seeing more of them? And it's almost the new year. Can I still sow some cover crop? We'll find out, so let's do it. All right, happy Monday, everyone. I hope you all had wonderful weeks last week. We missed quite a few days with the show there for the Christmas holiday and Boxing Day, of course, and a rough first half versus Arsenal, but a pretty good second half versus Arsenal. I feel like we could have two of those halves. Would make one full game, but baby steps. Anyway, we had family in town, which is always the best, especially because this particular family also has a 2-year-old, which is a really, really delightfully fun age. And the weather was wildly nice. Lots of outdoor time with the kiddos, mostly at playgrounds and parks. But the ability to do that around Christmas, no less, loved that. Had a blast. The majority of the seeds have arrived too, so got those all slowly organized and dealt with. Did a little flame weeding. May talk about flame weeding maybe next week. Also did a little relaxing, which wasn't the worst idea. Been a wild year working the 2 jobs that I work, and we didn't really do a vacation this year so much just because, you know, like with the kids in school and the farm in the summer, this week around Christmas is really the only time of year that we actually get any sort of vacation time, or that at least makes any sense for us. But with the extra family in town, we decided to stick around and staycation it up a little bit, as it were, and it was great. I hope you all had a good weekend too. I got this mug. I'm the cool dad you've probably heard all about, which is just absolutely the perfect mug for me. But anyway, yeah, great week, staying home, also cheaper than normal. It's going to be windy as all get out today, with the temps going from t-shirt weather yesterday to beard freezing weather tonight. So I suppose it was fun while it lasted. Now, just a matter of getting things, cleaned up and ready for the next round of t-shirt weather, or the next t-shirt season, which will be here before you know it. I've got some onions to start pretty soon. Probably next week. Oh, quick reminder that I will be going live on Wednesday, this Wednesday, to celebrate the old year and ring in the new one. 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time per usual. Should be fun. Bring your questions for the new year, new season, new farm, new stuff in general. Okay, so we've got 2 more mulch-based segments to round out our mulch series, one today and one tomorrow. And for today, I thought I would focus on mulch efficiency. Now, that might not sound like much of a subject, but the reality is that mulching is a big job and it should be done as efficiently as possible, or it loses some of its economic value, but also just, joy. And so I thought I would explore some of the tools and tricks that can make various types of mulching more efficient and do my best to make it fun and interesting. But the reality is that I won't have to try that hard to do that. I mean, there are machines that will shoot hay or straw onto a plot for you, which takes care of a lot of the interesting part pretty much on its own. Anyway, I got to thinking about this a little bit this week because the littlest kiddo and I were trying to collect some leaves from the yard for a little mulching project this week, and it was so incredibly slow raking and transporting them. And if it wasn't for the fact that I just, like working with my kid and wanted, a little bit of exercise, it was not worth the work. However, generally speaking, there are some lower tech things that anyone can do to make these jobs less taxing and time and labor intensive. For one, delivery of the mulch makes a huge difference, like where it is delivered. In fact, this is always something I've disliked about my current farm layout. All the good delivery space for compost and the like is up front, while the garden space is in the back. So in an ideal scenario, I would have the compost delivered to the middle of the gardens where I could mostly, easily distribute it. But on this new farm, that's not really an option unless I built some roads and even took out a little bit of garden space. The other challenge on my particular property is that it's sloped, and all that space to receive compost/mulch deliveries is not only at the front of the property, but at the bottom of said slope. So moving compost and hay or whatever it happens to be mostly just means I have to move it uphill no matter where it's going. Now, long term, there is a section at the top of the hill that I could lay a gravel road down to receive deliveries, making my mulching, significantly easier, but we just haven't got there yet. Also, I don't know if I want to do that, have a big gravel road on the other side of my house. So the location of that drop makes a huge difference though. Then moving it where you need it, you will need wheels of some sort for this, either a farm cart or wheelbarrows, but something with wheels that preferably can go right over the beds, though that doesn't, have to be that way, obviously. I don't have anything that fits over my 4-foot beds. For moving hay, we would often load the back of our small truck and drive it near where it needed to go. As long as it was dry, then distribute it from there. Doesn't so much work with compost, but generally just because we're doing it in a wetter part of the season where I can't really drive on grassy areas. because I like my truck to not be stuck. But in an ideal scenario, you would be able to drive the vehicle near enough to the beds that you could just drop each bale roughly where you need it, because hauling hundreds of bales, even a couple hundred feet, will wear you down. As for compost, wheelbarrows or compost spreaders are going to be the ticket there. They make a small compost spreader for the BCS that I got to mess around with a bit once at an event in Louisiana. But wheelbarrows work fine too and don't require a walk-behind tractor, which is nice. Loading is the bottleneck generally, like loading the barrows up with whatever you have. So if you have a tractor, you can load 3 or 4 barrows at a time by lining them up. Otherwise, hand loading is going to take up a lot of your time. Though, pro tip, lay the barrow on its side, like against the pile, to fill it up as much as possible like that, very quickly, then tilt it back up and top it off. It speeds things up quite a bit. Saves you a little bit of time. Now, obviously, there are larger tractors with compost spreaders, and that's all great too if you can, get the depth that you want. I've also seen where people will build blockers to attach the, to the spreaders themselves and guide the compost where you want it to go. Like oftentimes spreaders are spreading like 4 or 8 feet, which may not be helpful to you. So maybe you want it in like a 30-inch band. Like you could just drop a 30-inch wide band of compost to cover a bed, or like an 18-inch wide band of wood chips to cover the paths, like what you can see here from Green Things Farm Collective if you're watching on YouTube, or it's just a compost spreader and then you have a blocker to guide the compost or wood chips or whatever where you want them to go. I also remember a few years back where Shannon and Brian of Broad Fork Farm in Nova Scotia were using a self-loading spreader bucket on their tractor where they would back into the pile, lift the loader up, and then the loader had a mechanism where it could be driven over the beds and drop the compost simultaneously. So that's cool. I love the idea of the loading and spreading being combined, because oftentimes what you're doing is you're taking a loader, filling up some sort of spreader, and then you're reattaching the spreader, and then you're driving that over the bed. So it's an extra step. This takes one of those steps out, eliminating that whole step of having to use a bucket to load a spreader. Very cool. Then, of course, there are mulch spreader services out there in the world that have some wild equipment, like giant trucks with long hoses that the operator can stand there and spread compost for you on a bed or over an area. I don't know what they cost or how common they are or how available they are to you, but it wouldn't be hard to calculate the labor saved and figure out if it makes financial sense to use one of those services. There are also straw mulch machines and services that will literally shoot straw over an area for you. You effectively load the bale in the back and it shreds and or launches it, depending on whatever it is that you want it to do. I am not recommending these necessarily over just, hand spreading, but if the cost is effective for you and you have a lot of ground to cover, maybe a job worth outsourcing. You could at least look into it. Anyway, there are more nuances to this idea of making mulch efficient, but let me know your thoughts or experiences or even inventions or tools you use, and we can always get back to this subject at a later date. There's a lot to say about it. Otherwise, it's break time. And then up next, we will talk about collaboration, but by we, I guess I just mean me, so it's not a very collaborative conversation. Anyway, you get it. BRB. Today's episode is brought to you by Farmhand. Farmers who partnered with Farmhand say they grew an average of 63% this year because it's more than software. Farmhand is your business coach and assistant, helping to sell out, save time, and grow smarter with real data from real farms, shaping websites that convert, campaigns that sell, and fulfillment systems that run smoothly. Curious what that looks like? Meet the founder, Ari, at farmhand.partners/no-till and see the same insights and support the fastest growing farms rely on every week. That's farmhand.partners/no-till. Today's episode is also brought to you by FarmRaise. Still struggling with your balance sheet? Your lender's asking for a balance sheet and you're stuck with a spreadsheet mess or guessing your numbers? FarmRaise Tracks takes the stress out of farm finance. With one click, you can generate an accurate, up-to-date balance sheet that shows your assets, liabilities, and equity. No accounting degree required. You'll be ready for loan applications, tax season, or just a clearer picture of where your farm stands. Join thousands of farmers using Tracks to build stronger businesses. Get 20% off with code NOTIL20 at farmraise.com for the lifetime of your membership. All right, back to the show. If you, the listener or viewer, are enjoying this podcast, getting even a small amount of value from it, consider supporting our work over at patreon.com/no-till-growers. I will try to get to questions from everywhere the questions come in, but I will always get to your Patreon questions. Now, today's Patreon question comes to us from Patreon member Jared Kirst at Rivendell Farms, who writes, quote, "Hey nerd, super impressed with your Growers Daily iteration. I've been re-listening to collaborative farming episodes, craving answers or inspiration around cultivating productive cooperative relationships in our ag community. opportunities. It seems that there are glimpses, even working examples, of the powerful potential for true cooperation in farming. It seems equally apparent that many determined, independent character types attracted to life on the land can struggle to embrace collaborative opportunities. Do you have any thoughts about overcoming resistance or discomfort in building collaborative relationships amongst fellow farmers? End quote. Love this, Jared. What a great question for the last week of the year as well. And shouts to Jared also for being one of our longest running supporters. So very cool there. So I completely agree pretty much on both fronts. There is a need and a lot of interest in collaborative farming models, and also there are a lot of people who are resistant to the idea, or people who might even be into it but never fully pursue it. I guess I would definitely fit into the latter part of that latter category of people who are fully into this idea of collaborative farming, but have not pursued it, at least not yet, I guess. And for me, and probably a lot of other folks, I was many, many years into building my own farm business before this idea ever crossed my brain, or at least crossed it in a way that seemed doable. America is a very entrepreneurial place, and like Jared suggests, farming has a very independent vibe to it in general. So the idea of starting a farm with someone else just never really made sense to us when we were, starting out, or frankly sounded to us like what a farm was. It didn't seem like a great idea until our farm was already built and up and running, and we owned land that could really only be farmed by one family reasonably. And as I've said before, this is not a property with its slope and thick, soggy clay and poor drainage that I would really wish on even my worst enemy, having farmed it now for 5 seasons. So I guess using myself and our farm as an example, our first obstacle is just that we've poured a ton of time and money into our own business, and it's not really a place that would make sense to bring a partner into. We would need a different and more appropriate property, ultimately, which rebuilding an entirely new farm somewhere else is admittedly a daunting prospect given the shape of my body at present. So for us, I think it's just timing is one reason we don't see more growers doing these sorts of collabs. The second thing perhaps is straightforward models that outline, exactly how to mitigate financial risk, transition existing farms, and give a perfectly, reasonable and easy to understand roadmap to how to do all that and make it work financially. They exist, but the info can be disparate, a lot of work to dig into. So I guess what I see as the primary obstacle is twofold. First, a change in how we view farming as an independent family-owned entity into a real business like any other, where partners are involved, along with financial literacy and good business practices. Like, that has to be a thing. In effect, take the romanticism off the work and lifestyle of farming and put it on the starting a business that makes a reasonable living, feeding people and caring for the soil. More detailed how-to guides and information on how to make it happen is the other area I think we need filled out a bit. Chris Newman wrote a great book on the subject called First Generation Farming. There is one short book by greenhorns.org called Cooperative Farming. I will link all that in the show notes. Jackson's Collab Farming podcast obviously covered quite a few case studies, but in general, I think we could use a couple more super basic step-by-step guides, and maybe they exist. So feel free to shout those resources out in the comments. But also, I think we just need people who are willing to take the leap and put in the, work of not just focusing on how to grow stuff, but how to run a farm business with multiple owners. I think not only would these sorts of businesses make farming more reasonable physically by sharing the work and sense of propriety, but also more profitable and capable of feeding more people. On the propriety front, I want to focus on that for a second. This is something I think it's underappreciated about farms. We've never had anything but good employees ourselves, absolutely, but many businesses struggle with workers who just don't really care about the business itself. But sharing the ownership gives the workers that sense of propriety, because they have literal propriety. But that's not the only bonus. Successful cooperatives like Tournesol Farm in Quebec have done things like carve out space for growers to take mid-season vacations, which is practically unheard of in, independent farming. Not impossible, but not common. Though you will recall that in segment 1, my only real vacation time is Christmas. So yeah. There are other examples like our friends at Tilth Soil, which is a worker-owned co-op. Green Things Farm Collective, whose wood chip spreader was what I showed there in the first segment. So there are examples out there, and I think highlighting some of these sorts of stories and success stories helps to demonstrate what is possible. And again, maybe that's a bit on people like me who, talk about these things publicly, because I suppose one thing holding people back from getting into businesses like this in a more cooperative sense is not seeing enough examples of how successful people can be at it. They hear, the ones that failed or the horror stories, or maybe they just had one that didn't work, but don't hear enough about the people who are thriving and exactly how they got there. That's not a criticism of those people. Perhaps that's a criticism of myself for not highlighting more success stories in that space, or even some of the failure stories, like what went wrong? What could we do to avoid those situations? And maybe that'll be one of our themes for 2026, to focus a bit more on farm collaborations, what worked, what didn't. Anyway, what are your thoughts? Have you been interested in collab farming, but something has held you back? What was it? Let's get to the bottom of it, shall we? Otherwise, we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, late cover cropping. Be right back. Cool, Dad. Today's episode is brought to you by Johnny's Selected Seeds. Johnny's Selected Seeds is a proud supporter of Growers Daily. At Johnny's, they do more than sell seeds. They grow them. They trial them to see how they perform on Johnny's research farm in Maine and across the U.S. and Canada. Only the best varieties are added to their catalog and website. When you need proven varieties you can count on and detailed guidance from seedling to harvest, consider Johnny's your trusted growing partner. JohnnySeeds.com. That's JohnnySeeds.com. All right, back to the show. All right, so with the break last week, I got a little concerned that I would get behind on Patreon questions, so I'm going to take an extra one today, and maybe tomorrow, we'll see. But anyway, this one seems fitting, and it's from Rhea Paulette, who writes, quote, "Hi, Jesse. I'm aiming to grow a cover crop of crimson clover, lacy phacelia, and cilantro this winter. I've heard you say it's good to start this mix later in the fall or early winter. Is this because we don't want the seeds to germinate before the first frost? How can I determine when to sow the cover crop seeds? Do I need water? I'm in zone 6B. Hopefully it's not too cold to try lacy phacelia for this purpose," end quote. All right, great question here. Thank you. So the reason I feel like this is actually a timely one is that I will often sow lacy phacelia, peas, crimson clover, and cilantro at this time of year, like what is it, almost January. The thing is that, especially for the lacy phacelia, it's not hardy enough to survive the winter if you plant it too early. It will get tall and die. Same with cilantro. But if you sow it later, like maybe after your last field crops come out, typically in the past, it has been things like fall carrots coming out, and then we can sow a cover crop. Then what you get are smaller plants that are extremely cold hardy and make very pretty flowers in the spring. Now, it doesn't have to be sown, this late. It can be sown after your first frosts is fine. Even November is fine. But you don't want it to get too big before the hard freezes come. You want it small and squat and hardy. And unless it's very dry where you are, you will not really need water. If it is dry, you will absolutely have to water those things in and probably keep them watered in if it stays dry throughout the winter there. Here in Kentucky, at least, there is plenty of moisture in the winter. Too much most of the time. Mud is our winter mascot. I kind of wish it was citrus, but that's how these things go. All of these seeds, however, will take several weeks to germinate this time of year, depending on your weather. You can speed that up slightly by using a tarp or something over top, like a landscape fabric or something just to warm up that soil a little bit and keep it nice and moist. But then you have to be vigilant about checking to make sure that they have not germinated yet. Get good seed to soil contact if you can. Like what I normally do is broadcast the crimson clover and then run over that with a seeder containing the other seeds. That will give everything in the mix the seed to soil contact it needs to germinate. And in terms of how late I sow it, I typically have all of my cover crops in by January, but I have sown cover crops as late as February after we had a particularly icy winter that killed some of it off. That was actually, in fact, last winter. And that was the first time in many years of doing this that we had lost a mix like that. But ice storms live by the beat of their own drum. So that's fun. And sowing it that late, like in February, the results were fine, but the cover crop was a lot shorter physically. Like it just wasn't very tall. Like it just wasn't as tall as it would be if the roots had, had the entire winter to establish themselves. What I've never done is sown lacy phacelia in the spring, but it would be interesting to try that. I know it's possible. Maybe if I have some space for it, I'll give that a try and just see how lacy phacelia does in the spring, in the summer, in the fall. So yeah, you want it small and then enjoy the lovely flowers in the spring. That combo of crimson clover and lacy phacelia is absolutely one of my favorites, especially if you throw a little cilantro and peas in there. They are also, in terms of cover crops at least, pretty easy to terminate, so it's not a lot to deal with in the spring. Another bonus is that lacy phacelia makes for decent cut flowers. So to me, unless there is some crop family combo you would want to avoid, like you don't want to grow a cover crop that's in the same crop family as something else, it seems like a no-brainer cover crop for flower growers to me. Ditto cilantro, though I'm not sure it has the same stem life. Cut flower growers can, fill me in on all that. Anyway, I think that is it for this Monday. this final Monday, in fact, of 2025. Don't forget, No Till Growers is now officially a nonprofit 501c3, so donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Please make sure to like and subscribe and or follow wherever you're getting this podcast. That's an easy way to help us out as well. Enormous thank you to all of our show sponsors. And if you'd ever like to sponsor the show, you can reach out to Farmer Michelle at notillgrowers.com. Huge shouts to Willie Breeding for the theme music, Mike Hilbert for the production help and editing, and my wife Hannah for everything in the world. Also, shouts to Epidemic Sound for the background music that you can hear. Pick up a hat or a copy of my book, The Living Soil Handbook, at notillgrowers.com to support our work. Huge thank you to everyone who did that over the holidays. Hope you all enjoy your Christmas presents or your spouses or your friends or whoever you got them for, because that supports what we do. Big thank you to everyone over at patreon.com/notillgrowers, where at a certain level, or if you just bump up from one level to another, you sign up in the waning days of December, you get a shout out on the show. So big shout outs today to Elizabeth Louis. Oh, that's fun. Elizabeth Louis. That's a good novelistic name. JD, Allison Blake, another good one, and Seraphim. I say these a lot just so I figure cover my bases. Nailed it, at least partly in one of those. Anyway, in today's story, one that will span the new year, it seems, we are going to follow Ridge and Lens. Ridge was born into a hippie commune in Wales. I don't know why Wales, but I don't know why not Wales. But whose mom ultimately decided that things had gotten a bit too cultish for her liking in that particular commune and moved herself and Ridge to a small apartment complex in Florida, USA. The weather was a step up, but the lack of community was a step down. So Ridge's mom, Lens, had an idea. Why not start a community for single mothers? So Lens took out an ad in a local paper that just read, "Single mom looking for other single moms to start a farm with." Now, she got some odd responses, as you could probably imagine, but she also got a few people with general interest who wanted to meet up, one of whom owned some land there in Florida, a now defunct citrus farm that her parents had willed to her. And so that is how Citrus City Farms began. But for Ridge, he didn't know any of that, origin story. He just knew he suddenly had a group of friends and that there was a war going on. But that is for tomorrow on the Citrus City Showdown. Thanks for watching and or listening. We will see you then. Bye.